What's up, friends? Thank you for coming and joining me in my studio. Thank you for watching my YouTube channel. I love making these, so it means a lot to me that a lot of you enjoy it as well. I take questions and I give answers that meander all over and go down rabbit holes. And one of the questions a couple of weeks ago was who would win between Khabib and Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan has a katana, a sword. And I was like, I don't like doing sort of fight breakdowns in the traditional sense anymore because they're mostly just to sell fights, especially in my spare time where I'm just hanging out having fun. But if you're going to send me ones like that, I'm definitely going to do them. And that's what I said, and then people sent me crazy ones. So we're going to dig into some non-traditional, crazy fight matchups today. Let's get started. Okay, first, at Keel_Jed. Talk to me about this matchup. An alligator that can walk upright like a human versus an 11-foot tall Jon Jones. But they're in a swamp. It's like, okay, now you're adding extra variables. And variables is what creates the particular type of combat that you see, right? A cage versus a ring, 5 minutes versus 10 minutes, or no minutes, or a 2-minute round. All of these things change it. The fighting environment, the rules, what you can and cannot do, every variable changes it. If they're not in a swamp, an alligator that can walk upright like a human versus an 11-foot tall Jon Jones, 11-foot tall Jon Jones is going to win that every day of the week, right? Every day of the week. 11-foot tall Jon Jones, think about an 11-foot tall Jon Jones, how much reach he has. Imagine what he can do with that oblique kick if he's 11 feet tall. How tall is Jon Jones? He's like 6 foot something. 3, 5, 6 foot 5. He's a tall motherfucker. And he's got this crazy long reach. Imagine now, 11 feet tall. We're adding 5 feet almost, 4.5 to 5 feet on top of him. We're going to add a couple of feet reach. We're going to add a couple of feet to that kick, the side kick, the oblique kick. You know, he's going to piece up that alligator. Also, why does he get to be 11 feet tall, man? 11-foot tall alligator is probably a more fair thing. Jones will be able to move around him. He can walk upright, but can kick. He's got short little stumpy legs. Jones can move around, smash him up, piece him up every day of the week. But as soon as you introduce a swamp to this, now the alligator, much more familiar with the environment. Jon Jones doesn't fight in the swamp. Jon Jones fights on regular ground, so he's going to have a harder time moving, especially if he didn't get to train in the swamp. Right? Just drop him in the swamp. All of a sudden, Jones is going to be, a little less able to be balanced. He's not going to want to throw kicks at all, right? So now you've got Jones off balance, not being able to throw kicks, using the length and trying to move, less mobile. In the swamp, it's a much more even fight. Also, Jones is not unwilling to bite, but his bite is not going to be anywhere near as good. Although, again, variables create all this. If the alligator didn't walk upright, he'll do better. Go underneath the swamp water, get in Jones's foot, bite it, take him out, roll with him. The variable of 11-foot tall Jon Jones, he will defeat an alligator that can walk upright. But you put it in the swamp, going with the alligator. Fun, right? Honestly, to me, that's fun. But while we're on the topic of Jon Jones, we're going to go back to some other crazy matchups. But while we're talking about Jon Jones is presumably fighting Stipe. Maybe by the time you're watching this, it's announced. That's fun. You know, Jon Jones, one of the greatest fighters of the modern era, greatest fighters in history. And Stipe, of course, brilliant. But is Stipe, in his 40s, is he training the way that he used to? Does he have an urgency? It's not as exciting of a matchup for me. I know the UFC positions itself as the pinnacle, and Jon Jones is one of the greats, or the greatest. Certainly one of the greatest. But doesn't it feel like they're just teeing him up to try to give him a win and have him retire? I don't know why. I don't know exactly why. Dana White's so obsessed with Jon Jones and always says that he's the best. He fought once in the last 3 or 4 years. Not dogging Jon Jones. I'm a big fan. I love watching him fight. But it all feels kind of forced to me. And then over on the other side, you got Francis Ngannou fighting a really, really really difficult fight. So on one side, the UFC is supposed to be, the best of the best, the pinnacle of it. You've got a guy nearing retirement fighting a guy in his 40s who probably doesn't train full time anymore. And on the other side, you've got one of the greatest fighters in the world in Francis Ngannou facing a young guy, probably doesn't have 50,000 Instagram followers, and it's a guy who can defeat him. The better fight of the two right now is happening over in the PFL. And I'm not always trying to dog the UFC, but they're always selling, right? The greatest fight the greatest, the leader, the best, the most. These are sales slogans. These are not truths. They're slogans. They're marketing slogans. And there's got to be a few people out there pointing that out. Otherwise, you're just getting bombarded with marketing and being told what to believe. Francis Ngannou versus Problema is a much more interesting, dangerous, compelling fight. The two greatest heavyweights in the world, there's an argument could be Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. They're never going to get to fight each other because business is business. The UFC has a particular way that they run business. And although they'll tell you that the goal is to have the best fight the best, that's a marketing slogan. The PFL has to spend big money to bring over the Paul Hugheses, one of the great fighters in the world, who they paid him infinitely more than the UFC would pay him and more than the UFC offered him, so that they can bring some of the greatest fighters in the world in. Same with Francis. They have to do it. PFL will survive and will thrive if they spend the money to bring some of the greats in. But then they still have to overcome the marketing slogans and all of the sales and all of the hype and the constant selling and convincing that the UFC has been able to do for decades. So will they do it? I don't know. But which fight is better? Jon Jones versus Stipe or Problema versus the Predator? I'll take the Francis Ngannou fight. Okay, we're digging back into it. Weirdest potential fight matchups that we can find. Thank you for your weird questions. Okay, Big T Dobbs. Every UFC heavyweight champion in history versus a T-Rex. I mean, that's fun. Like, you have this picture in your mind of all of these heavyweights just storming in on this T-Rex and attacking it. But I mean, the UFC heavyweight champions are going to win. And I can tell you why. Because Bas Rutten, my friend Bas Rutten, is a former UFC heavyweight champion. Bas Rutten, I know, could beat a T-Rex. I'm around Bas Rutten enough. You give him anything, a stick, a pencil, a coffee mug, for sure he's going to win. But even without, he'll rip the teeth, he'll get to the neck, just for sheer ferocity and the focus and intelligence and analytical prowess to be able to figure out how to kill a T-Rex. I'll put my money on Bas Rutten alone. So if you add all of the other heavyweight champions in UFC history, I'm pretty sure they're going to do it. Now, also, if you add the other heavyweight champions, Bas will be the schemingest fighter of the lot. So he's going to feed some of them to this T-Rex. He's going to sort of shoehorn them into it. So it's busy while he figures out how to get up and chew through its neck or whatever. So the more you add, the more distractions that'll be for the T-Rex. And in the end, Bas Rutten will win. All right, more weird and bizarre matchups. David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar. Now, there's more, but I'm going to just start David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar. I know how that's going to go. Sammy Hagar, highly intelligent guy. If you've ever read his book, he's a very, very smart guy. Many people don't know this about Sammy Hagar, but he owns like huge businesses and has for decades. Before it was really cool for famous people to like buy businesses, he was involved in investing with non-sexy businesses that made him really rich. So Sammy Hagar is super smart, but David Lee Roth is a kung fu master. And don't step to me with this kung fu doesn't work stuff. That's a conversation for another day. But Chinese martial arts, there's a lot of real viciousness in Chinese martial arts. David Lee Roth wins that every day. However, the question is not David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar. The question is David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar and Van Halen bass player Michael Anthony, right? So we got David Lee Roth on one side, high kicks, jumping, spinning kicks, super dangerous. I believe he would beat Sammy Hagar. But you add Michael Anthony, as soon as there's multiple opponents, you have to really be able to deploy, a splitting of focus. And that is in and of itself a high challenge. Now, Michael Anthony also has a base that is, I don't know if you've ever seen it, maybe Chase put a picture in, but it is designed like a Jack Daniels bottle. And when I was a teenager, and I went to Van Halen concerts, they would each have a solo. And during David Lee Roth's solo, he would bring out a sword, right? So sword versus bass, sword's gonna win every time, especially a trained swordsman versus a bass player. But not just a bass player with a bass that appears like Jack Daniels, but his solo, he would essentially just pound on his bass and then drink Jack Daniels from the bottle on stage, which is super fun. And when you're a teenager, like, that guy's badass. But if he's drunk, so if Michael Anthony is like drunk on Jack Daniels, even the bass is not gonna help him. So David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony with the bass, not drunk, the bass is going to really play a big role. You can hit Dave, you don't even have to hit him in the head, you hit him in the leg, the arm, whatever. A bass is a really dangerous weapon. If Dave has the sword from his solo, he's going to take out both these guys. If Anthony has the bass, Dave does not have the sword, but Michael Anthony is drunk on Jack Daniels. I got Dave all day. The moral of the story is, and I'm sure of all the things we discussed, this one might actually sort of, provoke a lot of response. But for me, David Lee Roth Van Halen is far better than Sammy Hagar Van Halen. Don't get mad at me. It's just my belief. So I got David Lee Roth. Another question from Ben Brewer. Ben Brewer 200. Rey Mysterio. Now that is a 5-foot-something pro wrestler who's a super acrobatic guy. And I don't know anything about pro wrestling, but I do know who this guy is, and he's really fun to watch, and he can fly through the air. Rey Mysterio versus Chael Sonnen versus Jesus. So this is a three-way kind of matchup. I don't know a lot about Jesus. I'm just gonna be honest, right? I know a lot about Chael Sonnen. Chael is a friend, and also Chael's like, I don't like watching the YouTubes and Instagrams and podcasts of people that like kind of provoke and have like extreme opinions as a tool to provoke response. It's not really my thing to watch, except for Chael, because he's just so good at it. Like Chael will tell you purposefully that the guy he believes is going to lose, he'll tell you that guy's going to win, and he's going to win big, and he'll do that because he likes the game of it. He likes the game of playing with it. I love watching Chael, and I love Chael. He's been very good to me as a person and a mentor and a friend. So I hope that he would defeat Jesus and Rey Mysterio in a one-night three-man. But I just don't know enough about Jesus. Like, I don't know who this guy was. I don't know his training. I know he died, and apparently, when you die, that's it. But not this cat. Apparently, like, he died, but then like days later he was seen. So I don't know. I really I'm sorry. I'd love to be able to like dig into this, but what I do know is if you just put Rey Mysterio, Chael Sonnen, and Jesus in a cage, and you just say, Robin, you have to bet on someone, I will bet on Chael Sonnen. Okay, I will. So maybe in the comments or whatever, maybe on Instagram or something, you guys can tell me about Jesus and Rey Mysterio a little bit more. But for my money, Chael Sonnen defeats Rey Mysterio and Jesus Christ on the same night. A couple more. Now, at Wampum Physics gave me a few good ones, so we're going to finish on that. And then we always try to finish with something positive. And this has all been super fun, so that's positive. But yes, Wampum Physics. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus a 155-pound octopus. Octopus. My daughter loves octopuses. They have 8 legs. She knows that. She's 2.5 years old. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus a 155-pound octopus. We're missing information here. I'm sorry. Wampum Physics, I really appreciate it, and I want more because you got good ones. But is this on land or in water? Because that's going to sort of dictate the entire thing. On land, Khabib's going to rip that octopus apart. Octopuses just don't perform well on land. Underwater, a double leg takedown, the wrist ride, elbows, all this Khabib stuff that he uses to beat people up, none of that's really going to work super well underwater, and then Khabib's going to drown, right? So if we're just being honest here, Khabib versus 155-pound octopus, it is the variable of land or sea that's going to dictate the winner. The Khabib can defeat most animals on land. Octopus will definitely defeat Khabib in the ocean. Sorry, I couldn't be of more help. Also, from @Wampum Physics, a murder of crows versus a school of piranha. Now, my friend, I really like where you're going with all of this, but much like Khabib versus octopus, are we in the air? Because the piranha are dead, flopping around out in the air. What is a piranha going to do outside of the water? And a murder of crows drop in the water, they're eaten, right? But now, what's fascinating about this one is there is, unlike an octopus and Khabib, you're in one or the other, right? Could the octopus come out of the ocean and kind of get at Khabib on the shoreline? It's too shallow. Now we got to have a very specific custom depth. Khabib's got to be leaning over, like it just doesn't work. However, these two, both of their paradigms, their environments do touch, right? So the air and the water, they touch, they meet at a certain point, right? So now, if, again, we're in the water, crow dives down, chewed up by piranha. Piranha comes out, gets pecked by bird. But right at that limit, I think you got to go with the piranha, because if the bird, in murder of crows, by the way, that's just the greatest name. That's like the greatest categorization. That's the real term for a collection of crows, a murder of crows. Love it. Whoever came up with that, thank you. But as soon as the crow comes down, all you got to do if you're a piranha is bite the foot, bite anything. So again, @Wampum Physics, please send more. I love where your head is at, but the environment is going to really dictate this one. One more from @Wampum Physics. This one does work because they are both in the same exact environment. Bruce Lee versus 24 feral cats. Okay, now this one I've spent actually a little bit of time thinking about. Multiple opponents is always, we see it in movies, but multiple opponents, the issue is what happens with one individual when you lock your focus in on it. You use your entire lifetime of training has automated responses for particular things. So this can happen from the fringes of your perception. You have trained your body to respond in particular ways. But that's with the full focus on one. Now, if we add a second or a third, we cannot focus in on each of those, right? So it's a perception issue, is among the biggest issues when we're fighting multiple people. Now, you mentioned Bruce Lee, which of course, I don't know if Chase wants to show you, the paintings in my room. Bruce Lee is my jam, right? Bruce Lee inspired me to study martial arts as a young child. And I've read a lot of his philosophy. And of course, I do work for the Bruce Lee family, and I make analysis videos of some of his work and some of his philosophy and some real life Bruce Lee stuff. So I know Bruce Lee pretty well. And because he spent a lot of time in movies creating scenarios with multiple opponents, people will see movies and go, well, that's just a movie. But to create a movie, what you have to do is physically do these things. And to create a fight scene, you come up with ideas. And when you dig, and nobody has analyzed more Bruce Lee footage than me. Go to Bruce Lee social media, and there's my weekly or bi-weekly breakdowns of his stuff. What's fascinating about Bruce Lee movie things is years later, with a lifetime of study of martial arts, going back and watching the same videos later, you'll see him use things like feints to create a response in the person to open up a spot. He's not just, I'm going to throw a punch and I'm going to throw a kick. He is written in the creation of the fighting how the other person responds in real ways. So what you're learning is about human response. And when you create a scenario of throw this kick, as he moves, I'll throw this, you're actually creating, imaginary scenarios of what would really happen. Now, is it perfect? No, Bruce died in the 1970s. Had he lived longer, he would have been able to improve on his understanding of how people moved. And of course, in certain scenarios, maybe we'll drop in a classic clip right here. Bruce Lee's fighting an entire karate dojo. And I have broken this down on Bruce Lee platforms before. The humans are not moving as individual humans. They're moving in the way that will story tell this. And so there's a lot of beauty in his storytelling and his fight scene storytelling, but there's also a lot of real, true logic. This was, to this day, nobody creates with such true subtlety and real human storytelling of how another human would behave like Bruce Lee did. And again, no one has spent probably more time analyzing the films. And again, people will say, but it's just a movie. It is just a movie. But to create the movement of a movie requires thought, practice, writing, analysis, etc. Having said all of that, Bruce would stomp these 24 feral cats, right? They're so little, right? 24, what's that, 24? I was gonna say, what's that, 18? And that would be funny, but 24 is clearly 24, unless it's a baker's dozen, in which case it's 26, two baker's dozens. That's only 24 cats. Will some get on him? Yeah. Is one going to be locked into his leg? Yeah. And as it does, and he kicks the other one, it's going to go flying. He's going to stomp these cats. He also, whether you're writing a movie or in this case, a trained martial artist, the first thing he's going to do is start moving himself. Right? If you're just going to stand there and cats are going to attack you, but like we said, when he would create scenes of multiple attackers, he would be analyzing the movement of these things. So because of that, because he spent so much time thinking about and doing thought experiments on multiple attackers, you could have 6 feral cats. Bruce, also, he was in such unbelievable shape, he wouldn't get tired. He'd stomp those cats. Now, at the end, would he later die because of infection or something? I don't know. But Bruce Lee versus 24 cats, Bruce stomps them all day long. That was super fun. Please send me more of those. The more off the beaten track, the better. The more specific, the better too. All these variables are really fun because they force you to think in different ways. I've created a tradition for myself where I try to end any long form piece with something positive. I really like that. And some people have said they also appreciate it. Today, I want to finish on something that I've been kind of thinking lately. And there's this old quote. Now, there's a bunch of different versions of it. If I had 4 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 2 hours sharpening the axe. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening an axe. Or if I had 8 hours to cut down a tree, etc., right? And a bunch of different people are credited with it, including Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. Somebody can maybe tell me in the comments who actually said that quote and what the original quote is. But the gist of the quote, if I had 4 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 2 sharpening the axe. I never really understood what that meant a decade or two ago. When I used to sing in a rock band, I would think that means, woodshed and rehearse like crazy. And then when I was fighting, I used to think that meant like more training, more practice, more pushing myself. But now I've started to realize when I go to work here in my studio and I'm building things and I'm creating, I used to look and go, okay, I have 5 hours between my daughter going to school and then coming back for her nap where I can work. I got to get to work right away. So I'd get up in the morning at 8 and immediately start working. I'd pick this thing up and I'd start working right away. What I've started to do in the last year or so is not pick up my phone and then take my daughter and walk down by the river, and we call it duck walks. So we go look at ducks and we look at geese and we talk about the animals. And so if I had a 5-hour window and I do that for an hour and a half, I actually only have a 3.5-hour window left to work. But what I found is I work way better. I'm way more creative, I'm happier, and I do more work. So I actually am able to do more in 3.5 hours if I don't immediately dive into this thing than I would if I did immediately dive into that. And so it's a virtuous cycle. I'm now able to not only say, okay, don't think about work, don't go and plan it, don't plan what you're going to shoot today, don't overthink, don't start. I just don't do it anymore because I know that by freeing myself of it and being fully present in our duck walk and listening to the sounds of nature and talking to my daughter and stuff, that I'll actually end up doing better work. So the more I do it, the more I do not jump into this first thing in the morning. The better the work is, my mind is, I'm happier and more creative, and the quality of everything improves. So I just urge you to try it. Get an old school alarm clock and put this thing in a drawer or in a different room. Get up in the morning and write. Write anything. It can be 2 lines, it can be 5 lines, it can be fart, 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 fart. It can be anything. Write for a bit and then do something for an hour without it. Your days will improve, your life will improve, your happiness will improve, you'll be more productive. And it's the way. This is the way. Let me know if you do it and let me know how it works. Also, if you go to my Instagram, there's a link in my bio, and it's for a daily-ish kind of a positive, good vibes update that I send out via email and text. It'll always be free, and I love doing it. So if you go to my Instagram, you click the link in my bio, you can sign up to get my free daily Good Vibes newsletter. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who sent me these awesome questions, and thank you for spending time with me. Lots of love. Enjoy the hostilities, my friend.